Welcome to the Coding in the Wild podcast, where we explore the impact of computer science across various industries.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Coding in the Wild podcast. I'm really excited to have Arno and Flor with us today from the Netherlands. So let's start with ladies first. Flor, tell us a bit about yourself.
So my name is Flor and I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft. My responsibility is the Western European area, working together and working for developers that are on the Microsoft stack in some way, form, or another.
So I saw that your official title is like a DevRel program manager. Is that correct? I had never heard of that before, so I'm curious if you could tell me a little more about that.
Oh, sure. So DevRel stands for Developer Relations. So anything that touches developers, basically, that's what Developer Relations is. It is something entirely different from trying to market to developers. It's really the idea to sort of bring ideas that we're looking into to developers and get their input so that we can sort of feed it back into the company and make sure that we're making the right thing. And we also know that if we're making something really cool, we also know how to translate that to the developer audience so they understand the value of something, or it triggers some sort of enthusiasm on their end. I think that's maybe a description of what developer relations is, and that can be through many ways, channels, tools for sure. But that's, I think, all up what a developer relations is about.
Cool. And how long have you been doing that?
Developer relations, or at Microsoft specifically? Both. I think developer relations, the term is not that old yet, but I've been doing it for a longer time. It was just never called developer relations. It was called maybe online marketing or developer marketing or technical document. Like I was a technical writer for a bit, which in the end also were technical blogs, making sure to explain the software that we're working on and trying to get developers to use it and give us feedback. So I think I've been doing it for a longer time, maybe 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, but it's only been called developer relations, it's at least in Europe, for a few years now.
Very cool. So it's a fairly new term, but it's been around for a while.
Yeah, I guess, yes.
Thank you, Flor. Arno, tell us a bit about your background next.
Yeah, so I've been writing software for quite some time. I was always making television. I didn't find it very appealing, especially not something I wanted to grow old with. But I did like the part where I was solving someone else's problem. They wanted to make a television show. I did a thing or two with engineering, and I really liked that. It wasn't the right type of engineering, so to say. So I made sideways moves into writing software, making sure that people's computers worked. I mean, I was the person to go to if something with a cable was stuck. And then I think in 2 years' time, I completely moved into a software development role in that company. And I've been doing software development ever since. And I've been teaching it even. And that was fun.
So you teach right now, computer science?
No, I've been teaching it in a boot camp. So I don't even think it can be called computer science, because you just learn how to use Google to build the thing you absolutely need, and the rest is just skipped. But I've always tried to tell people, look, this is what you can do to make this work, and also, but this is what you should do to understand what is going on. But that it was always their choice if they wanted to go that path, because that trains you to do a job, not to understand the job. That understanding of the job on the bootcamp, that always comes years in the profession.
I see. Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, even for us, when we're studying something at a university, you get a 4 years or more, and then really you learn everything once you're out in the real world.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. So I'm especially interested to hear a little more about the Next Closet. So this is coined a sustainable marketplace for secondhand designer fashion, which is awesome. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing and how you use computer science to make that happen.
Well, you already said it. The Next Closet is a secondhand store for designer clothes. If you look at it like that, yeah, sure. But on the other hand, it's just a way to make sure we waste less. So sustainability is at the core of the company. That for me was the reason to apply there. And yeah, like any web shop, if you don't know how your web shop is behaving, then you're not having a web shop. Then you just have something that is flaky, breaks down all the time. So yeah, we have a team of the software development team is consisting of 3 part-time working men, me included, and I think 3 full-time working women. So they pull in way more hours than the men do. So it's not actually a bunch of guys, but mostly we are there as well. But it's a group of women owning this company.
You're tolerated.
Yeah, I'm tolerated. Yeah, I'm allowed to mentor them, but please don't touch our code, Arno. Yeah, the whole company is founded by 2 women who care about the planet first, and then they thought, yeah, but in which direction? And they figured out, well, fashion is really wasteful to the planet, so let's do something with fashion. And then they figured out, let's do something with designer fashion then, because that is a niche that you can actually make some money on, and also usually those clothes they last a bit longer than what you can just buy for $10 here or there. And how do we use computer science for it? We're learning. I mean, a few colleagues have been to the code school, to one of the code schools I've been teaching in, and yeah, they have really learned it on the job. They got really good at it. And from time to time, we think, oh, we should just look more at, well, what the theory behind this is. Why does it work like this? I think I have one colleague. He did an actual computer science degree, but for the rest of us, it's just people like me that just, well, flew from some place to be a predator somewhere else. And this is what we do. This is how we do it. And we're getting better at it every day.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. I myself am really passionate about sustainable causes, and especially, with not just fashion items, clothing items, but just in general, like across the board, every item that you use in your household, there is a sustainable solution to it that is, has less packaging, less plastic, less waste in general.
So at the Next Closet, we have a app that is, well, the front end, what you see in your browser, that is a React app that has a lot of, well, that's a JavaScript framework that makes life a bit easier if you want to make complex applications for your front end. We store some state in Redux, which is, well, a database for browsers, so to say. And that's very handy. We do everything in there for the front end. I have no clue what's going on in that code base. I'm really one of the worst JavaScript developers, and Flor is laughing because she, well, has seen me going on in JavaScript.
We have a story to tell.
Anyway,
tell the story. Sidebar.
It's heartbreaking. Flor, please tell it.
Real short though, but we. So we have a community event, and the last edition of that, Arno and I ran that one, and we needed a new website for it because the website, the first iteration of the website was released in 2015, and multiple teams have touched that event and have touched that repository. And so, everybody just made sure to do some sort of workaround just to get the event page up. And so it was a mess, and like touching something meant like everything was falling apart. And so we thought, oh well, then we just let's start from scratch, right? Like that's the thing to do then, because this is not sustainable. And it's for a Ruby event. So I thought we'll use some Ruby technology, like there's great CRMs that we can maybe use. No, Arno thought it was a great idea to use Next.js, which is like a pretty new framework. And I'm just like, well, first of all, it doesn't make sense because it's for a Ruby event, but also neither of us knows anything about JavaScript.
And that is exactly what I want all the listeners to understand. If you start doing the thing you already know, you will not ever get anywhere. But
no, you will not learn anything. But Arno, don't. I remember you saying after like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, like, why?
Shall we circle back on that decision of mine? Yes.
And also, is the event page live already? I think not.
So it was a challenge, but maybe that was Arno's point was to try out this, something new.
Yeah, so I'm not completely agreeing with Flor. I mean, I think that the technology is already somewhat boring even, so it's not that brand spanking new. But yeah, it's always good to try something new, but if you want to be productive, then maybe not.
Then maybe not.
Anyway, so that is that front end part of the web shop I work for. Yeah, on the back end of the website, there is a Rails application that is a framework written in Ruby, the programming language that I love and care about, and I will probably be writing it for the rest of my life because I really enjoy it. And yeah, that is storing all the pictures of the fashion items, storing all the transactions that we have with customers. Lets people upload items and the pictures of them, but let's also let the buyers and the sellers communicate with each other without us getting in the way. And so that is a backend in Rails, a Ruby, talking to a MySQL database, not interesting. Then on the front end, React to make it look pretty in your browser and make it interactive in your browser.
Cool. So it sounds like Ruby is your programming language of choice.
Yes.
Cool. Flor, how about you?
I think whatever gets the job done. I just really love the Ruby community. I think it's a very, very welcoming, very inclusive, very diverse community, very fun community that is centered around, developer happiness. That's the idea behind Ruby, and you notice this. So if I had to choose one, that would be Ruby, just because of the environment, which is very important if you're writing software.
How did you two come to co-organize the Ruby community in the Netherlands?
When I switched career into computer engineering, computer science, write software, I really wanted to learn more. I started at a scale up. Can you call it a scale up? The only engineering colleague I had, the only technologist that was in that company, left 2 weeks after I joined there. So then I was on my own. I think it was a startup then, right? And I had no idea what to do. I inherited a large code base and I didn't know which direction was forward, so to say. So I just needed to know more. And I just went to the Amsterdam Ruby community meetup and I just sat there and listened, and I was in awe. I saw a lot of good ideas. Many of them just went over my head. A few of them connected with me because I knew barely enough to understand what was going on. And after writing code for a few years, I saw that meetup group was getting smaller and smaller. So the community was still there, but there weren't any organizers anymore. And then eventually I got an email from that community page saying, look, we need to have a credit card, otherwise we're just going to abandon this thing. And then we just got the credit card and started it up again. And then Raita joined. She's an ex student of mine. Tom joined, Flor joined, and now we have a group of 4 people that went from, we do that thing with Ruby in Amsterdam, which is our capital, into let's make sure that we combine all our efforts and let the whole Netherlands benefit of this. I mean, if you would have asked me, it would have just stayed in Amsterdam because that's where I live and I understand that. But then you onboard Flor and then she thinks, why stop even at our national borders? Let's do the European Ruby conference. And yeah, that's just what is happening with Flor on board.
You have meetups in every capital, or like every capital city, or in multiple cities, and just like you have for other programming languages. And I mean, I started and ran the one in Vienna when I lived there in Austria. And so when I came back to the Netherlands in 2018, I saw that there was a frequent meetup in Amsterdam. I reached out to Raita, and Raita put me to work basically as a co-organizer. And then there was the Uruco conference, which is a annual Ruby conference that is hosted in a different city every year.
Yeah, in Europe.
In Europe, yes, which is the biggest also. If you want to host Uruco that year or the year after that conference, you need to pitch your city. And the participants or the attendees, they choose which city will be the winning city. And winning is like a really broad concept in this case, because it just means that you just brought a whole lot of organizing and stress upon yourself to make sure that you can host like 500 plus Ruby developers in your city. But I really wanted to pitch Rotterdam because it had been taking place in Amsterdam already before. And it was like, hey, there's other cities in the Netherlands that are very worthwhile a visit. And I talked to Raita about it. I didn't ask for permission. I basically just said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to mention your name. You will have to be on stage as well. And you have to say something. So we pitched it, and then Rotterdam won. And we're like, oh, now we have to do this thing. But it worked out. We had over 500 Ruby developers on a boat in Rotterdam, because if you're in Rotterdam, which has a lot of water and is known for its harbor, then why not host it on a boat, right? So that's been a success, and we've tried to go online with a couple of our meetups, not as frequently as every month like we did when we could still meet in person, but still. And we recently hosted 2 online conferences this year still. No Ruco, because Uruco this year was not going to take place in the city and the country where it was supposed to take place. It was supposed to take place in Helsinki in Finland. But of course, due to the world state, that didn't happen. So we thought it was a hilarious joke to call it No Ruco and still throw a community conference. And then
which Flor hacked together in 3 weeks, by the way. Dual track, 12 speakers, something like that, right?
Maybe. and that was fun. And Arno and I put together a little hackathon last month, as in sort of celebration still of Hacktoberfest, if you're familiar with that, and to try and get people to contribute back to important Ruby projects, maybe that are part of your normal, tool belt or dependencies.
Very cool. So that's awesome. The Ruby community sounds like it's huge. It's widespread.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun in the first place. Yes, absolutely.
Very cool. So I know that you recently recorded a podcast in Dutch, which I wish I could have understood. So it was around... I find it interesting that do both of you feel more comfortable speaking in English? I know, Arno, you had mentioned that you do.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have Dutch colleagues, some of my engineering colleagues are even Dutch, but it makes no sense to translate a hash map, an array, an object into Dutch, because these words just sound intensely clunky. So when we were on that podcast, which, by the way, lasted, it was a recording of 3 hours. We were at a loss of words eventually.
How long was it supposed to be?
1 hour, 20 minutes, which is already quite long, but that's the time of our commute in the Netherlands, which we don't do anymore because of the world situation. But that thing only got longer instead of the duration of, cleaning your kitchen or whatever it is that we do nowadays. Then we can listen to podcasts.
So was that podcast recorded in person?
Yeah, that was the happy moment in between where we could meet each other again, maybe, potentially. So we did it.
Yeah, that's cool. But so in that podcast, the topics were code of conduct, building community, diversity, and inclusion. So maybe you could just tell us like a brief summary in English, what you discussed there.
Are you giving me the floor, Arno?
Flor, you've got the floor.
Yeah, we talked about code of conduct and building inclusive communities, and sort of the lessons that we've learned also with the Ruby community in Amsterdam, where we, for instance, have one community member who is in a wheelchair, and where you typically maybe not think about making sure that a venue is wheelchair accessible. Suddenly, we needed to make, we're sort of confronted with this and thinking, oh gosh, like something we never thought about, but maybe that's also something that's keeping people away from our meetup. And that is something that we can solve and make sure that the meetup is just more accessible. So we've learned a lot of lessons, but also me joining Microsoft and sort of comparing Ruby events with some of the more like maybe traditional software events suddenly was really eye-opening. Like in the Ruby community, we have a code of conduct, and we make sure that we have a code of conduct team that is diverse and that everybody is very aware of exactly what sort of rules for engagements we have for events, and where you can report when you see something that is unsavory or where you don't feel comfortable. And I was suddenly in all of these events that don't even that where organizers would ask me what even is a code of conduct, or where the lineup of speakers suddenly wasn't as diverse as I am used to and even the range of topics wasn't as diverse as I was used to from Ruby communities. So I just became sort of hyper aware that we've been very privileged in the Ruby community, and that's something that we should bring to more communities.
So Flor, I have another question for you. I have to ask, I checked out your Twitter and Barack Obama follows you. Tell me about this. How can I get him to follow me back? What's going on there?
I really don't know how that happened.
Are you serious?
And honestly, like, a lot of people ask me this, and I'm just like, okay, I don't know. I really don't know.
That is so funny.
Do you know for sure that you're the right Flor Drees? I mean,
maybe there's another Flor Drees.
Well,
though if you Google me, there's really only Flor Drees. In one Flor Drees. It's a weird name anyway.
Maybe he's also interested in Ruby, and that's why he followed you.
Or my rants about, lack of diversity and inclusion with stuff, or my rants about open source software being commercialized, or any of my little rants.
I want to ask you guys just one last question in general. If you have any fun insights or tips related to computer science that you would want to share with students or teachers.
Last week, me and a small team at Microsoft, we released a web development for beginners course that is entirely free, entirely open on GitHub, and you can use it with GitHub Classroom for educators if you'd like that. But you can also just follow it self-paced, and it really, it starts at the mere basics, like what are the tools of trade, what is GitHub, what is Git, what is accessibility, how do you build accessible applications, and then goes into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all the way to the point where you build some sort of authentication system for an imaginary bank, but also you create your own game in JavaScript. It's like a Space Invaders type of game. So it's a really cool course, and just because it's it's free and it's open so everybody can use it. We're working on a couple of translations. So we have Spanish translations. We're working on Dutch translation, which Arno raises his eyebrows because he knows how incredibly hard it is, and he just spoke about how clunky the word sounds when you're trying to translate them to Dutch. And so sometimes we also don't translate the words because it's just how you use the words like methods or arrays. I don't feel like
what's the clunkiest word? The clunkiest translation of a word?
Actually, that's funny because sometimes I go to Microsoft's owned websites that are then translated because they see that I'm from the Netherlands. And then sometimes the words there are just hilarious and have nothing to do anymore. Like if you would throw them in Google Translate, or I should probably say Bing Translate, I don't know. Anyway, if you would translate this back, they would make they would have no relation to the original word anymore. So what is the best? So I think business case, I found a translation for that as werkkoffer, which is like a suitcase that you bring to work, like a briefcase. So
an actual business case.
Like an actual business case, like a briefcase that you bring to do and you have your business papers in it. And it's like lovely, like those type of things. And especially when it's about technical terms, because usually those translations are done by an agency and they don't necessarily understand what the technology what it's about. So they would translate something like serverless as a concept as serverless, like there's something, and in Dutch that would mean like there's something wrong with the servers, but there's nothing wrong with the servers. They're not there. Or actually they're on another. They're just another computer.
Yeah.
So at Microsoft Flor, does everybody speak English in your office in the Netherlands?
I think it depends on what kind of meeting you are. I mean, if it's just Dutch people, but mostly those meetings are recorded for other people to also, respond to at a later date. So we mostly speak English.
Very cool.
I haven't been in the office for a long time though, especially now. Like I'm in a EMEA-wide team, so it doesn't make yeah, like I don't have any colleagues necessarily in the Netherlands, and we're all distributed anyway. So I was working from home before this whole thing already, and I'm super used to it.
Oh, I see. Cool. Arno, how about you? Were you working remotely before the pandemic, or is this new?
From time to time. Since I'm trying to mentor and coach people, I really like to be around when they work, but I try not to impose any restrictions on how my colleagues work. But before I was working for WeTransfer, a file sharing website, I was always going to the office there. I just had one half a day that I was working from home, and I got all the things done that you can't have when you have people around you asking you questions about whatever. But for me now, it's a bit different now that I work from home. I started at the Next Closet in April, which was at the highlight of the wave in the Netherlands. So I have been to the office 4 times since, and that's working fine. But yeah, it are mostly Dutch colleagues. We have some Dutch colleagues who have. I'm not saying that they don't speak that language, but for me it goes natural. I've been speaking English with all Dutch clunkiness in there for the last 5, 6, 7 years. But I'm quite happy with how it goes. I mean, it's not pixel perfect, but it's good enough. It gets the job done, and way better than Dutch with all those business case-ish words that you have to translate into Dutch. It just makes no sense. So at the engineering team, we had one colleague from Portugal and the rest Dutchies, and he left. And then over the duration of I think 3-4 months, we gradually moved into Dutch again, even on our Slack channel where we're discussing things. But that Slack channel is going to be read by the new hire, and they probably don't speak English. They probably don't speak Dutch. They do speak English. So yeah, we're trying to always switch into English whenever we see each other and we talk to each other, unless it's a one-to-one with a Dutchie. Then it makes no sense. But all the note keeping I'll do in English, because you never know who wants to share something with whom.
Arno, Flor, thank you so much for joining me today for episode 5 of the Coding in the Wild podcast.
Thank you for having us on.
Okay, that's a wrap. Join us for our next episode on Coding in the Wild, brought to you by CodeHS.